Hello, it's Doug Fisher. Thank you for joining me today for a discussion about literacy achievement through sustained professional development. We're going to focus on the role that professional development can play in raising students' learning and their achievement. Not too long ago, Nancy and I were walking through the parking lot on our way after class to our cars, and we saw a bumper sticker that you'll probably recognize. It warmed our hearts. If you can read this, thank a teacher. And in the car on the way home, we were talking about this and thinking that this bumper sticker might need to be revised. Maybe it should read, if you can read this effectively and write an analytic essay under 42 minutes, and you meet all of the math standards, objectives, and learning targets set forth by the Common Core State Standards, and you walk briskly through life in a healthy body, taking 10,000 steps a day while experiencing social and emotional well-being, and you can effectively utilize technology and social media to assess and analyze important information, and you play the piano perfectly, thank a teacher. We know that teachers matter. Teachers are critical in the success of children, and what teachers do matters most. It's the behaviors and skills and repertoires of teachers that results in students' high levels of learning. And that's what we want to talk about today. What can teachers do to raise the literacy achievement of their students? We're going to focus on specific tips, how these tips can be used to leverage professional learning for our colleagues, with our colleagues. The first tip is to reach agreements on an instructional framework. In the articles that accompany this discussion, the first one focuses on a single school, Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks experienced significant changes in student achievement when the faculty agreed on an instructional framework. When the faculty agreed on things like modeling and group work and guided instruction, it helped align the professional development and coaching efforts because they agreed and they reached consensus. From the student's perspective, it brought some predictability to the classrooms, especially as students went from grade to grade to grade. In another article that accompanies this discussion, we focus on an entire district, 45 schools, and their enactment of an instructional framework, and the resulting changes in student achievement, the increases in student achievement that occurred when teachers across a large system serving 27,000 kids got together to figure out what high-quality instruction could really look like. So whether you're sitting and listening to me from a classroom perspective, a school perspective, or a district perspective, the first bit of advice I would offer is that you have to reach agreements on an instructional framework. The framework we use looks like this. And we drew these triangles back in 2001. And we tried to communicate that there are times in a given lesson where the teacher has more responsibility. And there are other times in a lesson where the students have more of the responsibility. And we tried to show that visually. What we didn't mean to imply was that there was a linear relationship. Instruction does not have to start with focus. It doesn't have to then move to guided, then collaborative, then independent. It can occur in a much more recursive way. A lesson could start with an independent task. It could start with collaborative learning. It could start with focused instruction. It just has to be a cycle that results in students' achievement. Part of the success in professional development in raising students' achievement is to get lots and lots of teachers to know what high-quality instruction looks like. And that's what we're working on. So I'll go through a few minutes of each of these and give you a little bit of ideas about what we think about with these aspects of instruction. For focused instruction, we're looking for a clearly established purpose. Other people say objective or learning target, and we say purpose because we want to make sure that we make learning relevant and interesting. Here's what we're going to learn today, and here's why we're learning it. The other part of focused instruction is teacher modeling. Opening up our brains and showing our students how we think about something, a reading, a writing, a problem, how we think about it. Of course, this has to be appropriate for the grade level, but it's opening up our minds and helping kids see how an expert problem solves. Duffy noted that thinking is invisible. So all we have is talking about our thinking. And every day in every lesson, we hope that teachers model their thinking, their expert experience, knowledge base for their students. Another aspect of high quality instruction we think of as guided instruction. And these are the questions and prompts and cues that teachers use to facilitate students' deeper understanding. This is often an area that is difficult. When students have made a mistake or have an error or a misconception, the teacher wants to help and often resorts to a direct explanation. When there's an error, when there's a misconception, the teacher fixes it by telling the student what the answer is. Instead, in a gradual release of responsibility framework, that guided instruction should be questioning, prompting, and cueing so that our learners do more of the cognitive work. It's really effective to do this in small groups. You can watch and learn and listen to a small group of students while the rest of the class is working productively, and really push on the error correction that needs to happen for young children to learn to read at high levels. In fact, I'd even say if we didn't see guided instruction on a daily basis with some kids, I would propose that they won't learn to read very well. I don't know how to teach reading well without small group needs-based instruction. That doesn't mean that every student needs guided instruction every day. Some students need guided instruction multiple times a day, and others don't need it on a given day. It depends on the needs that the teacher is trying to address. In terms of collaborative learning, this is when students work together to produce something. It's that student-to-student interaction using academic language that really pushes that social nature of learning, where students have to make meaning in the presence of their peers. And this helps consolidate what students know. It's often left out in lessons. In fact, in our work in San Diego, this is an area that we had to do tremendous professional development on. How do we get more students to use more academic language in the presence of their peers more frequently? And we've done a lot of work on teachers coaching teachers and getting students to assume more responsibility and to be productive in their classrooms. There are a whole bunch of resources on the website around collaborative learning and helping students be productive with their peers. In terms of independent learning, if I could do this over, Nancy and I've talked about this a lot, I would divide that independent learning into two halves. In-class independent versus out-of-class independent. We do a lot of things as teachers with kids in class independently. We have them write in journals, we have do-nows and must-dos and may-dos and independent reading. We even give quizzes and those kinds of things. Those are in-class independent tasks that we're pretty good at. In terms of out-of-class independent, we want to be careful that we don't send students home with things they don't yet know how to do. Because practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. We need to send students home with things that they know how to do so they can engage in that very important practice and really learn to read and write at high levels. Again, this can be done in any order. You could start with independent, you could start with collaborative, you could start with guided, you could start with focused. Every day, students will know what they're supposed to learn. They will hear models of that learning. Their teachers will notice the errors and mistakes and misconceptions they have and guide them through that. Students will have time to collaborate and interact with their peers, and they will be held accountable for their learning. That's the basic model that we use to create a framework. Now, there's all kinds of discussions about what it looks like that are where the power for professional development comes in. For example, when we move to the second thing is that how do you reach quality agreements? So we have the framework. How do we get to that? For example, what does it look like? Here's the second tip. We've got to reach agreements on what each of those things look like. What does a quality purpose statement look like? What does quality guided instruction look like? I chose purpose. There's a rubric. It's on our website as well as on the the site for the conference, and we looked at what would it take to have a strong purpose. Now this took months to create, with negotiations and teachers and principals and coaches and lots of people. And here are the things we looked for in the indicators. I'm not going to go through them all. You can look at it, you can revise it, you can download it, you can change it. Here are just a few things we need to think about. In that left column, it shows here are the indicators. In the next set of columns, it's what does it look like at the exemplary level, proficient level, etc. These indicators of quality first came from teachers watching videos of other teachers. What did they notice consistently across the collection of clips that they would argue were quality? Then we went on walkthroughs looking for those, and we built people's knowledge base about quality instruction. And this one's only on purpose, so you can imagine you need indicators of modeling and of guided instruction and of productive group work, collaborative learning, and independent learning, etc. And there are many of them on our website. One of them says that the established purpose focuses on student learning rather than an activity, assignment, or task. So we agreed as a community that to get to purpose, which was our framework, we had to have a learning target, a purpose statement that focused on what we wanted students to actually learn, not what they were going to do today. Simply having that agreement on quality drove some of our professional development, drove some of our coaching, and drove some of the feedback that teachers received. Here's an example I took from a kindergarten classroom. The content, this is from English language development, so this is for English learners. This is a time of day where we focus on language development, and the content is that I know my ideas may be spoken as a sentence. And the language we're looking for is that these kindergartners can speak and write their ideas in complete sentences. And there's a language chart there that helped them discuss and engage with their peers as they were speaking. The students know clearly what they're supposed to learn today. For the third tip, once we have a framework and once we've reached some agreements on quality, what does that framework really look like in practice? Then we need to think about providing teachers with feedback from their peers, from coaches, and from the leaders. We have to trust that the feedback we get from other people is intended to help us improve. I'm not talking about evaluations. I'm talking about the ongoing cycle of getting towards higher quality instruction for our students. And Hattie and Timberly talked about the types of feedback. One type of feedback, and their work was really directed at students, at learners, and one type of feedback was feedback about the task. And feedback about the task, or corrective feedback as it's often called, is effective for alerting someone to errors, but can be ineffective if the person doesn't know what to do to correct that error. So I want to be careful about feedback about the task. For example, providing a teacher with feedback about a specific assessment item and the way that the item can diagnose errors and misconception is only helpful if the teacher understands the feedback and has the support necessary to correct the error. So we want to get someone to try something out and they do it wrong, and we give them corrective feedback. It might not change that teacher's behavior. We really need to think about other types of feedback to help people continuously improve. Another type of feedback is feedback about the processing of the task. This is considered to be highly effective because it reminds the teacher about his or her cognitive and metacognitive thinking. For example, you might say, I noticed that you're posting the lesson's purpose on the board and referring to it again and again, and even at the end of the lesson to check students' understanding. That's giving you more information on what's getting in the students' minds and who's not getting it. It's getting the teacher to process the task. That kind of feedback is highly effective for teachers from their peers, from their coaches, and from their leaders. A third type of feedback is feedback about self-regulation. This is also effective because it assists the person in self-assessing. For example, we might say, I saw you were frustrated when the team seemed to hurry past your ideas for developing academic language. You handled it well, and when you brought it up again later in the discussion, the team was ready to listen. so that teacher's getting some feedback about his or her processing and the regulation that person used in a group setting. That's highly effective, and it helps the person think about who he or she is and the regulation of behavior. And the fourth type of feedback that Hattie and Timperley talked about was feedback about the self as a person. This can be ineffective because it may not provide the person with any information about what to do next. For example, you might say, "Way to go," which may serve as a compliment to the team or to the individual and may serve to do some motivation, but it doesn't do much to help the team engage in further reflection on its efforts. When you give someone feedback about themselves as a person, it's often perceived as a compliment, but doesn't help get something moving next. Alternatively, noting that a member of the team persevered and was able to complete a difficult task may serve to reinforce the action and allow the person to support his or her peers in developing stamina in the future. In part, when we have a framework and we've enacted quality ideas, here's what it looks like. We have to then move to providing people with feedback about what's working and what's not working. And that feedback has to be constructive, aimed at making continuous improvement. All of us, me, you, everyone, can improve our teaching. Our framework is an ideal. It's a vision. It's a hope. It's what we want to have happening in classrooms. And every day we try. But where we falter, where we fall down, we get some feedback about how to improve that performance. Tip number 4 is to mobilize an instructional leadership team. Every single school in our school system has an instructional leadership team, an elected group of teachers who meet on a regular basis for their own learning and for figuring out how to take things back to the faculty. It's about teachers having ownership in the professional development of their colleagues. The principal serves as a member of the instructional leadership team, and there are typically grade level reps, so one from kindergarten, one from first, one from second, etc., that serve on this instructional leadership team. They receive an investment in professional development time. They have days away from their teaching responsibilities, which have about 3 hours of learning time, of deep learning time, and then about 3 hours of facilitated time about how they will take this new learning back to their colleagues over the next couple months. It's a significant investment in terms of time and resources, and one that has resulted in not a blame for the district. The district is making us do this, or someone else is making us do this. That we are doing this. We are enacting this framework. We are providing feedback to our colleagues. This investment in the group gets them to lead their colleagues as team members, as partners. And I understand, I recognize that there's some expense in this, but we spend money on the instructional leadership team and investment there rather than bringing in a whole bunch of outsiders to tell us how to do something. It's us doing the work internal and becoming very proficient at it. And tip number 5, walk the building often. Walk through the building with your colleagues. Walk as a leadership team. Walk as an ILT. Walk as a grade level team. Look at each other's classrooms. There's tons of things to learn from this. When I think about walkthroughs, I don't think about the administrator specifically going in a classroom and finding, evidence for an evaluation. I'm talking about walking in the building to learn from it. I walk the classrooms at my school all the time because there are a million good ideas. Something that I may not have interpreted on our framework might be done by another teacher in my school. I want to take that. I want to make sure my students have the absolute best instruction possible. And so every chance I get, I walk the building. We also built in Chula Vista a professional development model where teachers could walk the buildings of other schools. We created a walkthrough calendar that people could sign up for. We accept 50 people to a campus on a given day. They walk in teams of 15. They stop at every third classroom to debrief and look at trends. They don't stop after every classroom because we don't want them giving feedback to individual teachers. The walkthrough is about learning for the team that's walking the building, not the people who are currently teaching. So we stop every third classroom, and the first part of the conversation is, what did you notice? And it's all those interesting things related to the framework and related to quality around that framework. What did you notice? What are the things you noticed that you can take? The second part of the conversations are, what did you wonder? And this is where questions, like what happened before the part of the lesson? What's going to happen next? What kind of writing will students do? Did that student really understand that sound symbol correspondence? It's having those conversations that changes us. Those conversations are grounded and rooted in our discussions around quality and our discussions around an instructional framework. As I said earlier, teachers matter, and what they do matters most. And professional learning is the key. We can all get better. We all know and think about instruction all the time. Let's get together and look at high quality instruction. Let's build a framework. Let's operationalize that framework through discussions around quality. Let's give each other some feedback about this in a trusting and honest way, and let's walk each other's classrooms and deprivatize that practice. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed the session.